comes, you'll say, I did it all. I did it all.
I'm ready today.
Me too. I like that attitude.
I swear I lived. Hope that you spend your days, but they all add up. And when that sun goes down, hope you raise your cup. Oh, I wish that I could witness all your joy and all your pain. But until my moment comes, I'll say, I did it all. I did it all. I owned every second that this world could give. I saw so many places, the things that I did. Yeah, with every broken bone, I swear I lived.
All right, we now have dad jokes in the chat window.
Now that's a way to kick off an event. We should just make this a tradition now moving forward.
I swear I lived. Every broken bone, I swear I did it all. I did it all. I owned every second that this world could give. I saw so many places, the things that I did. Yeah, with every broken bone, I swear I lived. I swear I lived. I was scared of dentists and the dark. I was scared of pretty girls and starting conversations. All my friends are turning green. Yeah, the magician's assistant in their dream. Oh, and they come unstuck. Lady, running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. Is this movie that I think you like? This guy decides to quit his job and head to New York City. This cowboy's running from himself. She's been living on the highest shelf. Oh, and they come unstuck. Lady, running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. I just wanna know.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of the Administrative Data Summit. We just wanted to start the day off with a statement of acknowledgement about the tragic event that occurred in Texas yesterday. I know that many of you are deeply affected by this event, and we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the feelings and emotions surrounding this incident, and thank you again for being here with us. I'm going to pass it back to Sarah to go over today's agenda.
Thank you, Naran. We just want to say welcome again, folks. Thanks so much for joining us for day 2 of this event. My name is Sarah Buska, and I'm a relationship manager in UIT. It's been my distinct pleasure to plan this year's summit event with a talented team. Joining me in co-hosting today's event are America Armenta, who is a Europe intern, and Ron Hashimi, who serves as a data governance analyst in IRNDS. Today's high-level agenda is the exact same as yesterday's agenda. In the morning, we'll have speaker-led sessions, and after lunch, we'll have an opportunity for free-form discussion. You can find the detailed agenda on our event page in the email I sent on Monday or via the link in the Zoom chat. Today's session is being recorded. For folks who may have missed yesterday's session, one of the original goals of the Campus IT Plan program is to facilitate connections and collaboration across the university. Today's event is day 2 of the 4th summit designed to uncover synergies and foster collaboration around one of the themes highlighted in the most recent Campus IT plan, data. In this plan, we had over 50 IT efforts relating directly to data, more than any other category. With an eye towards the future, I encourage you to use this event as a means to help build your own data strategies and roadmaps to foster connections beyond this event and continue evolving your IT strategies collaboratively. I'm thrilled to introduce this year's sponsors, Doug Berman and Tom Kramer, to kick off day 2 of the Campus IT Plan Administrative Data Summit. The floor is yours, Tom.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm very pleased to be here. Yesterday, Doug took a lead effort in rounding through things, and today it's my turn. I hope I can follow through at his example. Sarah mentioned some of the goals of the Campus IT Plan. I just want to underscore those. The goal of the Campus IT Plan, as well as this event, is really to promote visibility of efforts as well as people, connections across different groups and different experts who might be working the same problem from different ends, and ultimately to allow coordination. In other words, Sarah, if you could advance. We are looking to make Stanford information technology more informed, more effective, and to work at scale, not just within our departments and groups, but for the entire university. Now, yesterday was a real showcase, and 76 people so far, 77 are back again today. Here are some of the personal observations that I took away. First of all, I have Tableau envy. I could not believe the range and the depth of solutions, the sophistication of understanding reporting needs, and then crafting that from various data sources. I really want to follow up on that. And yesterday's event was inspiring, with so many different departments having really blazed a trail that's worth emulating. Second, and this is one of those connections and comparison activities, in preparation for this event, we learned that there are at least 3 distinct data cataloging efforts going on at Stanford. And with colleagues in H&S and the Data Governance Center, we now know that while all of us are calling our efforts data catalogs, they're in fact 3 different things, but they're complementary, and there's common cause and common techniques I think that we can apply, and I'm really looking forward to future collaboration. And third, it struck me that even in 2 years of pandemic and largely virtual setup, Stanford is replete with ingenious pockets of people, with innovation and people applying technology to further the mission and the operation of the university. And I was so impressed about how we collectively came together and really had a very lively session, even though it was completely Zoom. The dad jokes is definitely a running theme, and I'm hoping that we will all see more. Please engage throughout the day, as we did yesterday, and make this as much about exchange and give and take as listening to those that are speaking. So without further ado, let's get into our main speakers. And we have a series of keynote presentations today. We have 3 30-minute keynotes. As we go through each of these, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and the speakers have all allocated 5 minutes at the end of their 30 minutes. So it's 25 minutes followed by 5 minutes. I will be giving warnings in chat and through other mechanisms if helpful to make sure as we're approaching time that we don't fall behind. So that's just fair warning to everyone, and we'll stay on track. So our first group of speakers will actually be a panel, and we have a location intelligence, the science of where, brought to us by a group of colleagues from LBRE. So Swati Prabhu, Dobie Howard, Wilson Lee, Morgan Summer, Supriya Bhagwat, Sharma Rose, Daniel Vogt, and Karen Huynh will be speaking. And I think the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and good to see you all. I'm Swati Prabhu. I'm the Associate CIO for Land Buildings and Real Estate. I also oversee the Location Intelligence Program. I'm here to talk with a bunch of my colleagues here and share with you about location data. We also have, in addition to the speakers listed here, Wilson, Dobie, Sharma, Karen, Morgan, and Supriya, who will each introduce themselves as we make our way through the presentation. We have Benoit Collignon, who will be moderating the Zoom chat, answering questions, sharing links, anything you need as we make our way through it. So, what does location data mean to you? You're probably thinking maps and the use of, where am I right now? That's location. How do I get to where I want to be? That's location. You've used various modes of location maps, maybe paper, many, many decades ago, onto computers, now to mobile, and onwards. As you look at if you Google for this, there's tons of wordy definitions, lots of information out there to tell you about what is location intelligence, what's spatial analysis, and on and on and on. We're here really to tell you, by example, show you some sample use cases and applications, and to demonstrate how is the Stanford community using location data. Some of it you might go, aha, I know, I have used that. Some you might go, I had no idea. As Tom said, this is to trigger that I had no idea, but let me find out more conversation. Just the tip of the iceberg for today. So location data is really something where the primary key is this where, the information of location. Where is something? Where are the people? Where is the landscaping? Where is the fire system? Everything coming together to create this location intelligence. But it doesn't stop at the where is something. The real power is in these overlays. Not just saying, where is the emergency? Overlay the data of where are the people? Now overlay the data. Where are the utilities that feed into this emergency? Where there are all these people? Now that's some powerful analysis and data coming together to help us make some decisions. It helps just about every administrative unit on campus. And you'll start to see some of this as we get into specifics here. I could go on and talk about it, but really it's about jumping into the use cases and applications. Each of the presenters are going to talk through different use cases and get you to start thinking and start those conversations that we'll come back to. And we'll make our way, and I'll call out each of the presenters as they speak about some specific examples and demonstrate them. So to get us started, the maps, as we talked about, easy use case, you've seen them all everywhere you walk on campus. There's a podium, there's a Department of Maps and Records who's working diligently, keeping these updated. Campus keeps changing on us, so we keep changing these maps, and there's a routine to this. But in addition, there's tons of online resources, and I'm hoping each of you are aware of it. If not, today is your day to go and get familiar with every one of these resources and more that are available to you. The eateries web map, where are all the eateries? A campus tour, I want to take a walk around campus and then look at each of the spots that have been highlighted as areas of interest and tells me a little bit more about the building, tells me a little bit more about what I'm looking at as I make my way through campus. Or it might be a map maker tool. This is pretty valuable for those of you that may want to share map data. I want to draw on a map where my location is. I want to navigate MapMaker for you. And of course, the flagship campus map, available to anybody, including the public, to come and find out more about campus, about parking, about restrooms, points of interest, and onwards. But it's not just about location and navigation, as we established. Last year, one use case, when we had the wildfires, the use case was, hey, we have all these fires, and UHR asked the question, how do we reach our employees? We have a zip code map. We know where people live. Could we overlay these wildfires with where we have all our people and create an analysis to show us who lives within 5 miles of these fires so we can have targeted outreach to Stanford community members who might be affected? The end result of this had no map. There is nothing to look at. It's just a plain old Excel sheet, yet driven by location. Location is what drove this Excel spreadsheet. Without it, it would be somebody going through and saying, I think the zip code, oh, but it's too big a zip code. Is it really within 5 miles? It could be more than 5 miles. And that's where the power of something like this comes into play. More examples, handing off to my colleague, Wilson Lee, to talk a little bit more about some operational use cases.
Thank you, Swati. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wilson Lee. I'm GS Manager with LBRE Maps and Records Department. As Swati just mentioned about the online campus map, last year we rolled out the campus map community version. Users now have an option to sign in with their student ID to access additional map layers, such as the building status and the all-gender restroom locations. Apart from the additional layer, both the public and the community version have the same user interface and functions. Next, please. As we have online campus map for public use with general information, we have another application specifically developed for operation and internal use. It's called the Operational Base Map. Operational Base Map is an interactive mapping app, provides more than 190 map layers. Those 190 layers help users to perform their daily work. The layer inventory includes detailed civil base map, utilities infrastructures, trees, irrigation systems, outdoor structures, landscape areas, and more. The value is not just seeing each data set, but in the ability to overlay and correlate the data points to analyze, like, show me the utility lines within 10 feet of a planned event locations. Next, please, Swati. We also developed application for access inspection purposes. On the left is a fire hydrant inspection app. This application is for inspecting fire hydrants in the field, such as testing the water flow and physical condition. We also have boilers, sewer, and roof inspection apps built for LBRE Facilities Operations Department. At the bottom right is the Outdoor World Landscape app. LBRE Architect Office used this application to inspect all the landscape and outdoor structures on campus. As of today, there are over 2,000 outdoor features inspected. There's an ongoing meeting hosted by the Architect Office and Facility Operations Department. They will review the reported locations, and LBRE will address the reported issue as needed. So before we build all these applications, users use paper form, Excel spreadsheets to keep track of all the information and issues. Now with the digital inspection apps, it helps saving papers and streamline the inspection process and make the workflow more efficient. Next, please. So all the core features of location intelligence are helping users analyze and plan the project. For planning and awareness purposes, we have the construction application. This is an application for construction project managers to enter the project's boundaries. All PMs meeting quarterly and use this application to share the projects with other departments and project managers. Another application that we developed for LBRE Utilities Department is the Capital Improvement Projects app. They use this application to enter the planned future projects for next 10 years. This tool helps them to visualize the projects in the big pictures, as well as budget planning purposes. Next, please. We recently deployed the 3D campus map. We worked with a vendor to build the 3D digital models. And so far, we have a total of 250 models built on the main campus. The purposes for this project are for printing the physical 3D building models for Architect Office, and also to create a web application for 3D building visualization. As you can see on the screen, one of the cool features of the 3D apps is the daylight tool. With this tool, you can show the sunlight and shadows of 3D buildings at the different times of the day and year. It helps for outdoor events and building planning. Next, please. Let's look at another cool data visualization tool for LBRE department. This is an augmented reality application. Tree managers from our grounds department use this application for his tree inspection. You can view the tree in AR environment and get the tree info easily and quickly by just pointing towards a tree from his mobile device. This is of course possible because both the application and the map data is location aware. This all comes down to the intelligence for locations of things around us. Back to you, Swati.
Thank you, Wilson. That was very valuable. Now, moving onwards to the inside of buildings, we have Dobie and Sharma.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dobie Howard, LBRE Maps and Records, here quickly to talk about indoor data management. Among indoor information includes room information, how rooms are being used. We also are responsible for assigning building addresses and communicating that to the post office and other delivery systems, as well as building IDs and such. Those are the location primary keys for that. Next slide. So we track, we have a system for space management, the university's official space management system, commonly known as iSpace. This information tracks how rooms are being used, what organization are assigned to those rooms, what are the room types, where are the conferences, where are the faculty offices, where are the wet labs, dry labs, etc. Having all this information in a database allows us to actually highlight and create these graphical floor plan reports that you see here and make them available. Next slide, please. So each department has one or more space coordinators, is what they're called, and they are responsible for updating their space when they move into a new room, or when a lab changes to, if there's a renovation, let's say a lab changes to a conference room. This screenshot on the bottom is just showing some examples of that. The nice thing here is we can create reports through time. We can look at how much space any school or department had at any year or a specific day in the year. Next slide, please. So the other system is a bit more secure, requires training, and not everyone has access. More individuals, Stanford staff, have access to this page. FIMS stands for Facilities Information Management System. This is bringing collected data about a building together in a one place for users. Users can obtain building manager info from this page, what the district work center is in case you need to create work orders or talk to them, an engineer, someone in that. Square footages rolled up by department, room type. There's a lot of information here. And I can just also report or mention real quick on this is we do have other reporting tools. We do have Tableau, space data reports can be done in that, as well as OBI reporting. Next slide, please. And we are in the process of obtaining 360 images of interior spaces such as mechanical rooms, which is a great benefit to LBRE. And we have received, as you can see here, 360 images of classrooms. And so we get any updated files and we post these on the FIMS page through our attributes section for users who would like to see what the classrooms look like. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, we have our apps team has built applications. So we do track assets inside of buildings, and these assets require inspections periodically. Those inspections allow users to see where, when they have to inspect a specific asset, where is that asset? There could be a lot of exit lights on a floor, and which one actually needs to be inspected. And this allows the LBRE staff to go out and put information about these assets. This one here is eyewash inventory. Next slide. And the next one, it will be the egress lights or the exit lights on that. So, and that's it for me. Next slide, Sharma.
Hi, I am Sharma Rose. I'm from the Office of Facilities Planning and Management at the School of Medicine. So in partnership with
We lost you, Sharma.
working on a number.
Oh, you're cutting in and out, Sharma. I suspect she can't hear. You're cutting in and out, Sharma.
Dobie, did you want to just talk through these couple of bullets here?
Yes, she just put the slide together. Can you talk through, Swati? That'd be great.
Absolutely.
You're more familiar with this. Thank you.
Of course. So we have, as with all things, data governance is critical. So we have now really begun to focus on how do we get organized around spatial data, internal data governance to keep these things organized and be able to share. We'll be working to see if we can use other tools out there. Many of you have probably recently heard about the hoteling and space reservation system that's being rolled out by UIT, another program that we helped develop and define the requirements and pick the tool called Condeco. And now it will be a tool that UIT is going to offer as a Stanford Flex space as an enterprise system for anybody to be able to use to manage your hoteling desks and spaces. Last year, in working with UIT, again, we had the Stanford U enhancement, where you could go and say, which is your primary work location at Stanford U, and have that tied into the space database. Previously, anybody could type in any address, but now it's an authenticated and validated list, bringing enterprise systems closer together. That's the gist of, one of the examples here. How can we get data from the Stanford U and people data closer to space data, two enterprise systems coming together? And we have also got an occupancy tracking. This obviously has a lot of privacy and sensitivity around it, so it's not available to most of the people, yet it's a way to track which staff members occupy or assigned or are to a specific room. This is managed as part of the space management. And there's a lot of people data associated with these spaces and many initiatives around this topic of occupancy and where are the people and where are the spaces. Very important questions to be asked and answered that each one of you is doing, especially in this ever-changing dynamic environment that we have. Sharma, are you back? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, my apologies. My headset was not happy with me. No, we covered exactly what we were doing. I think one of the things that I do want to point out is that with the Location Intelligence Committee, we're always looking for new ideas, as well as some of the things that have come up have also included possible move management, as well as all the ones that we have listed here. So it's a great way to be able to find out what a business need is and be able to see if we can find a solution, as we did with the hoteling and space reservations. Back to you, Swati.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharma. As you noted, Sharma is with the School of Medicine. So it's not just about land buildings and real estate. Location intelligence is a Stanford-wide program. We will talk more about the program in a couple of slides, but just wanted to shout out that we have people from various units, UIT, RD&E, the schools, every one of them engaged and working towards this location intelligence program. Now that you've seen some things and you've got all of this, I'm sure you're thinking thoughts are racing. Keep those thoughts racing, because we're talking about data that moves, location data that's moving. It's not just sitting there in one place. There's time that keeps changing, and there's the dynamic information of things that move on you. For that, we have Karen from the Transportation Department.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. I'm a data analyst at Stanford Transportation. So this is a screenshot of Marguerite's real-time bus tracking webpage on our transportation website. We also have a mobile app, which is powered by ETA Spot, in which you can download to get the same information. And this real-time bus tracking app and webpage allows users to get up-to-the-minute information about the status of every bus, live 24 hours a day. And so, for example, when you open the map in real time, the bus icon will be moving along the route, and there's an option for you to grant access of your location data, the "You Are Here" feature, so you can see on the map which bus route you are closest to. And the data comes from automated bus trackers. Next slide. So we do keep track of parking inventory. And for now, our parking team actually goes out to manually count the number of spaces and parking type in each lot. And so these are screenshots of maps that show just that. We have license plate recognition, or LPR technology, in place to potentially make our inventory management more efficient. And we do incorporate LPR as our parking enforcement system. And so what this means is that license plate replaces physical parking permits that Stanford affiliates purchase, and that these are cameras which are handheld, are affixed to enforcement vehicles. And some examples we use this information for include parking enforcement, like I mentioned, parking lot utilization patterns, permit usage statistics, management of abandoned vehicles, etc. Next slide. Here are examples of Stanford Roadwood City maps, which can be found on our transportation website. And these are more static location data, so showing where the shuttle stop is at the Roadwood City Caltrain, or where the different types of parking are located on the Roadwood City campus, such as where the bike storage room is, or where the electric vehicle charging stations are. Next slide. Here are more examples of Redwood City maps, and the map on the left shows bike route options from the Redwood City Caltrain to the Redwood City campus, suggested by our biking team, and the map on the right identifies where the commute.org and Margaret shuttle stops are along the route. And back to you, Swati. Thanks.
Karen, as you can see, our Stanford world is beautiful and it's perfect, and yet we live within the outside world, and having data and location information for what's happening around Stanford is just as important and valuable as information about Stanford. And here's just a few examples of working with other agencies across the Bay Area to get some of this content and data going and updated and accurate to keep our, speaking of data, we'll move on to talk about data acquisition and how are we gathering some of this information to update our maps. There is, of course, a ton of data that's crowdsourced. There's data that's administrative driven. There's content and attributes about things that flow in from the various application. And yet the core of where is the authoritative source of where is this utility line? Where is this road? Where is this building? For that, we have a data acquisition team, the field services team. And to talk more about this, we have Morgan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Summer, and I'm part of the data acquisition team within Stanford's Maps and Records department. Our team also runs Stanford's drone survey program, which means we get to fly and collect data all around campus. For this section of the presentation, I will go over the types of data we collect, the tools we use to collect them, and then a little bit more about our drone program. Next slide. So what kind of data do we collect? The first are our topographic points. These are your typical coordinate system data that have northings, eastings, elevations, and usually a description. Next, we also collect point cloud data, which is similar to topographic points, but this information is collected in large quantities using LiDAR. Lastly, and most recently, we are collecting aerial imagery and video using our drones. These images can be used to make georeference maps, mesh models, or just images of hard to reach areas. Next slide. How do we collect the data? What kind of equipment do we use to collect survey quality data? Well, on the top left, we use our total station, which is a tool that measures angles and distances to get those exact coordinates of specifically topographic points that we're talking about. Similarly, our GNSS receiver uses our GPS signal as well as SmartNet network of reference stations to get those same topographic points. Down in the bottom right is our 3D Faro scanner, and that is also one of our newer pieces of equipment that uses LiDAR technology to collect large collections of data for point clouds. And then in the bottom left is one of our main drones that we use. This is pretty self-explanatory. We fly it all over campus to collect different images and videos of hard to reach areas for roof inspections, road maintenance, and other varying construction sites. Next slide. So a little bit more about our drone program. All of our members are FAA Part 107 licensed, as well as we have a blanket clearance to fly on campus. So we take safety very seriously. One of our advantages of using the drone program on campus here is we use our other equipment, such as the GPS receiver, to georeference all of our models and maps onto the campus. So we can tie in any model like this one here of Memorial Church. We can tie it into the rest of the campus using these targets. Next slide, please. So one of our current uses for the drone program has been for road maintenance. So we will just go and fly specific roads of interest, and using the images, we can see like what kind of damage the road has, and we can place that on the map exactly where it needs to be, and it helps keep the campus updating on an on-demand basis. In addition to that, we've also been flying different demolition sites around campus and taking videos and still images of the process to track the progress along the way. And we hope it's useful for all the people that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. There are some questions about privacy that were in the chat, and I hope they got addressed with Morgan's description about the program we have in place. But there is plenty of governance and a video surveillance committee that's overseeing who is flying it, why are they flying it, what's happening with the data, and there's documentation when a request is made to fly, and the pilots are certified to fly these drones, and only they are allowed to fly on campus. They still notify people as appropriate, and then the data is kept secure and available only to the use case for which the specific flight was made. Right, thank you, Morgan. So let's round it up talking about the location intelligence program itself. As mentioned earlier, this is a Stanford-wide initiative. LBRE just happened to lead it. We have representation from various departments and groups, and an open invitation to every one of you to join us, offer us your suggestions, challenge us, give us your ideas, and engage with us. The program is, like all programs, an ongoing initiative with multiple projects. You saw a few of the projects today, but it's an ongoing set of projects. Most of these projects have phases. So if you didn't see a particular feature, it's coming. Somebody asked, hey, can I get access to the 3D map? It was rolled out phase 1 to just the LBRE unit to try it out, make sure it works. And we're ready. So if you're willing and wanting to look at the data, send us an email. We'll give you access to that 3D campus that we were looking at. And there's a bunch of deliverables we work towards all of this. To keep us all organized, we have our project manager, Supriya, who will talk through a couple more items here.
Thank you, Swati. Hi, everyone. I'm Supriya Bhagwat. I'm the IT project manager at LBRE Applications Group, which is with Swati. I'll talk briefly about some of the outreach and communications aspects within this program. As you can see, it's a wonderful collaboration we have with multiple groups and departments across Stanford. And the portal is a peek into the various initiatives, both existing solutions and upcoming initiatives, subcommittees. We also had sent out a few newsletters, which will keep coming on at brief intervals and things like that. You will see some of our objectives when we started with the program as well. Just to remind you, the location.stanford.edu is the URL that you can use to visit this website. It offers an insight into some recent implementations and some of the samples that we shared today as well. We will continue to spotlight and share activities within the program. For example, reference documentation like developing guidelines for data governance. Swati, Sharma, and the others talked about that briefly just a little while back. So that brings me to my next slide, please, Swati. Thank you. So one of the ongoing initiatives is to establish governance on location data. They're basically guidelines and principles which aim to help establish consistent and reliable data sets that can be used along with other areas of reporting across the university. So the subcommittee put together a framework which provides guidance on requirements for various elements that we've talked about, like security, finance, data, content, and access, and all of that good stuff, including stakeholders. So it also has addendum documentation, like things like glossaries, acronyms, all of that stuff. So the next step, of course, as Swati mentioned, is their ongoing initiatives. So we test and refine the framework after peer feedback, and then the link is also available on the website as it's shown on the slide. And since we're on the topic of data and documentation, it leads me to a related subject, which is data integration and storage in the realm of location intelligence. Swati, next slide, please. Oh, you're already there. Thank you. So the various applications and projects that we have worked on, they helped identify the need for a centralized repository. It led to development of processes and integrations into Google Shared Drive. So Toby talked about FIMS a little while back. It has the application has several attributes and information and links to documentation. So those are hosted onto Google Shared Drive. And there are other applications as well, which integrate with Shared Drive and other Google kind of hosts that we have. So that was a preview into the world of location intelligence program. And with that, I'll hand it back to Swati. Thank you.
All right, that was our teaser. We'll look forward to having a lot more conversations, discussions, and answering your questions. I know Benwa has been trying to stay on top of the questions in the chat, but in the remaining minute here, if we have any more questions, please go ahead and ask.
Swati, this is Tom. I did see one question up above, well, maybe perhaps an issue or an opportunity that John Freshwaters pointed out, that a map that showed the wireless access points, perhaps on the floor indoors as well as outdoors, might be interesting given the some of the wireless, the Wi-Fi resilience that we've seen in the recent Campus IT report.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great point. We have created a couple of more maps early on, but it's not a data set we have kept updated. But thank you, John, for bringing that up. Valuable data set and something that we should to work towards keeping updated. We'll follow up. Thanks, John.
And you may have also seen lots of props and kudos for the Stanford U location change. Lots of interest in the 3D maps. I think some people probably have some ideas about how that might be deployed. Plenty of privacy questions, which I think have been answered in the chat. But Swati, what is the best way for people to be in touch with you and your team?
Location.stanford.edu. It has contact us information on there. Easy to remember. Just go there and write to us. The team is CC'd. All of us eagerly monitor it. We'll be happy to get back to you and answer any further questions, comments. We have APIs now being worked on. So if you're planning to connect with data or bring in space data to validate your systems, please talk to us. We have a location API just for building and room data at this point. Happy to work with you on it.
All right. Well, what a great appetizer, sampler platter on spatial data at Stanford with the entire team. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right. I am very pleased to introduce our next speaker is Josh Schneider, the University Archivist, who is a part of the Special Collections Department at Stanford University Libraries. Josh Schneider is Stanford's university architect. He partners with community members to collect, preserve, and make accessible Stanford administrative records, faculty papers, and materials documenting campus and student life. And Josh is going to be talking about the records management at Stanford and some opportunities that we might all have collectively to be doing a better job about preserving the past and the administrative data that helps describe important facets of Stanford. And I'd say this might be more important than many people realize. I'm coming from the library, so perhaps I'm biased with a historical perspective. This morning, I was on a phone call with the United Nations, the UNESCO program, and the International Federation of Libraries Associations, talking about the loss of Ukraine's documentary heritage. So this is a great example of a dramatic situation and the systematic and targeted destruction of the documents and the data that make up the cultural and administrative record of an entire nation. And so as we think about this, I hope we never see similar situations in our environment, but everything that we do and that we produce and ultimately that we save tells an important story. So Josh, with a little bit of context, perhaps higher than you would have thought or where you will take us, could you talk about records management?
Hi, everyone. I'd be delighted to, and thank you so much, Tom, for that introduction. Though I think you may have mentioned at one point that I was the university architect, and I would just like to clarify that I am the university archivist. Interesting role that I'd love to tell you more about. Perhaps in some ways, I'm an architect of history, but probably in some other ways I am not. So anyway, that was a wonderful introduction. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to share my slide deck and make sure everyone can see, and just going to assume that everyone can see my slide. So could I get some indication? Thumbs up from somebody.
Looks good.
Looks good. Thank you so much. Well, as Tom mentioned, I am Josh Schneider, and as Stanford University Archivist, I'm delighted for this opportunity to speak with everybody about the Stanford Archives and some of our recent thinking about opportunities for records management in particular that might be helpful in managing and preserving Stanford's administrative data and more. So apologies, I joined a little bit late this morning, so I don't know if we have already had a land acknowledgement, but I want to recognize that Stanford sits on the ancestral land of the Mwakma tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people, and consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship to Native people. So I thought I might start by telling you a little bit about the Stanford Archives for those of you who aren't familiar with us. I believe this was in my introduction, but I like to say that our primary purpose is to partner with the university community to document the history of the university, including its founders, leadership, faculty, staff, as well as students, and the university's relationship to our neighboring communities, including Santa Clara County and East Palo Alto, the state, the region, and the world. So in the archives, we preserve and help ensure future access to materials in any format, documents, email, photographs, recordings, digital files, data, websites, and support teaching and research with those materials. The archive serves in some ways as Stanford's institutional memory. We're responsible for collecting, processing, and promoting materials that reflect the university's increasing interdisciplinarity and diversity, and we develop associated programming to extend the reach and impact of our work beyond Stanford. We are part of a larger Department of Special Collections in Stanford Libraries, and for those who aren't familiar, that department serves the teaching and research missions of the university by supporting classes and research, creating and sharing exhibits, physical and online exhibits, and collaborating with Stanford administrators, faculty, postdocs, and students to tell an inclusive history of Stanford. So as this slide indicates, our holdings include more than 30,000 linear feet. Archivists like to talk about linear feet, but if you imagine a very large warehouse or several warehouses, in fact, of material, as well as many, many terabytes of digital records within thousands of collections. This is just talking about the university archives. So we collect all sorts of materials. We collect a lot of materials from faculty that are no longer being used by those faculty members, including content that could support teaching and research at Stanford and beyond, publication, and more, as well as records of Stanford committees and working groups that wouldn't be captured elsewhere. So those of you who are directly working with faculty and supporting their work might recognize some of these categories of material, but this is just sort of a short list of the types of materials we often ask for when we're working with faculty or their families. Often we enter the picture pretty late, and that's not, we try to get in early, especially around digital files, to let people know how important it is to preserve their digital files because it's so easy for those to be lost over time. But often we are one of the folks who reach out to families and departments end of life or when someone has moved on from the university, left the university in some way. So in addition to collecting from faculty, we also collect from administrators. So we collect records of long-term historical and legal significance produced by university offices in the course of conducting official university business, including the materials you see listed here, many of which you probably recognize from your own work. So our administrative history collections date back to the founding of the university and a bit before that as well, but mid to late 19th century. We preserve and manage records of Stanford's governance and administration, including the records of the Board of Trustees, President and Provost offices, the Faculty Senate, and schools, departments, centers, and institutes. We also collect the personal and professional papers of Stanford's presidents, provosts, deans, directors, and other senior administrators, which provides insight into key decisions and initiatives in Stanford's history. Not only do these materials document the evolution of the university, but also relationships, cultural, and social changes. I want to just briefly point to, I think we're all hopefully in a stage where we are enjoying more and more in-person and hybrid meetings as well as Zoom meetings, especially for those of us who might still have a physical footprint on one of Stanford's campuses. One of our primary foci in the last 2 years has been on documenting the impact of COVID at Stanford. So we've collected materials from Stanford community members. As an example, we've archived the decisions of the Emergency Operations Center and the Departmental Operations Centers. We've regularly collected materials from the President and Provost offices. We're doing a whole bunch of web archiving, which I'll mention in a minute, and Zoom archiving, which I'll also mention in a minute, which were activities we already sort of had underway, but ramped up significantly as the university really moved to a state of diaspora. And we've also embarked with the Stanford Historical Society's oral history program on a series of oral histories on the impact of COVID. So if you're not familiar with the Stanford Historical Society, it's a really wonderful program. I think we are one of the few universities in the country that has a historical society, including with associated staff and a dedicated oral historian. It's really fantastic. We collaborate really closely with them on a lot of public programming. They support publications and documentaries and other kinds of outreach and events, tours of campus. And I think they actually have an upcoming publication, both on the work of former President Wally Sterling, who oversaw a lot of big changes at Stanford, as well as an upcoming series of oral histories they plan to publish relating to the tenure of former President John Hennessy. So those of you who have a little bit more of a memory and have spent some time at Stanford might recognize some of these names. But it's really a great organization that helps us support all sorts of public programming, including this one. So there are a few different kinds of data. Of course, I believe you heard from my colleague, Tom Kramer, previously, probably let you know a bit about the kinds of data that the libraries are really collecting more and more of, and thinking more and more about how to preserve and provide access to those. There's a few kinds of data, a few examples and cases that I just wanted to point out because they're becoming very prominent for us in the archives. One of those is email archiving. So we collect email from Stanford administrators and faculty, and we use software to help screen for sensitive information. The software you see here is ePad. It's actually a somewhat earlier iteration of the software, but ePad is software that was developed by a Stanford, or actually several Stanford PhDs in computer science in collaboration with the libraries and the Department of Special Collections. And it was specifically geared towards answering responding to the types of challenges that we routinely come across when we're working with data and other kinds of content from faculty and administrators. So how do we preserve the context of this information so people can understand it in the future? What sorts of sensitive information might appear? How can we best screen for that sensitive information and not limit future access, but also be, of course, very mindful of all the types of sensitive data and all the different concerns that might show up in the email of a prominent administrator at a university. I mentioned previously that we've really ramped up our web archiving efforts, and some of you may have been in touch with us in the past as websites are sunset at the university. We often try to help to step in to ensure that we have good crawls of those sort of websites at end of life. But we also regularly crawl thousands of sites and web seeds at the university, both on the stanford.edu domain, as well as elsewhere, all the other places where Stanford is prominent on the web. So we collect official sites. We also collect sites from faculty and as well as some student organizations, campus events. And this has really been a huge way in which we've been helping to document all of the different changes at the university. And it's also helpful for us because, of course, while we try to work with as many campus groups as we can to help preserve their history, we I think take some comfort that at least some baseline information is probably being captured from a lot of different groups through our web archiving efforts. But it is an active process and one that is as much an art as a science at this point, crawling and archiving the web. Tom had mentioned this wonderful project. It's called the Sucho Project, and it was founded in part by Stanford librarian Quinn Dombrowski, who was interested in considering how librarians and archivists could help support preserving the cultural heritage of Ukraine. And that is really one piece of sort of our web archiving infrastructure and portfolio. It's not, that effort is not all taking place through Stanford or at Stanford, but of course, we're thrilled to be associated in any way with that great project. So you could see here, I haven't talked about this. I guess I thought it was obvious, but I will just identify that this is one of Stanford's first websites. So you could see in place of the cardinal, we have this sort of awkward shade of blue. Maybe not so awkward. It's a pretty blue, but it's was a surprise maybe for some people the first time they see it. And during COVID in the last few years, especially, we've been considering how to document, as I mentioned, a university in absentia when we've had to maintain and build community remotely. So we've been collecting the files of the university's Emergency Operations Committee and regularly taking records of the trustees, presidents, and provost offices, capturing decisions made at the highest level. We've also archived, as I mentioned, websites and Zoom recordings, such as this recording of the 2020 Campus Community Vigil for Black Lives. This recording is accessible now through the recently launched Black at Stanford anthology, which we developed in partnership with the student leadership at the Black Community Services Center. So those of you who are regularly creating Zoom recordings or updating websites, I guess I might have mentioned at the start, I'm hoping that this talk, which I'm sure is fairly different than some of the talks that have been received been given during the summit. I hope it maybe helps us all pause and look around our home workspaces or office workspaces, or look through some of the files on our servers and desktops, and just think deeply about the types of files that we're creating and how we can help ensure that those materials are preserved and made accessible in the future, some of these really important files. And I'll talk more about aspects of that, but I did just want to indicate if maybe this talk is a little different than some of the other talks at the summit. That's what I'm sort of hoping that we all reflect on that a bit, and I'm really interested in also learning from all of you on sort of your own experiences of creating and trying to manage and preserve files while you've been at Stanford and how that has worked. Of course, our digital materials are preserved and made accessible through the Stanford Digital Repository, which is managed by Tom's group, the Digital Library Systems and Services group in the libraries. So that was a long introduction, right? But I want to give you the context of why the Archives is interested in records management in particular, but before we sort of talk about some of those opportunities. So where does records management fit into this picture? Records management, for those who haven't looked at that term in a while, represents a set of activities required for controlling the creation, distribution, use, maintenance, and disposition of recorded information. So disposition is sort of an interesting word. Archivists aren't interested in saving absolutely everything in the world. There are some pieces, estimate of maybe 5% of materials, records that are created that are actually of enduring historical value that the archives would take a long-term interest in. Many of the materials that might be created, I'm sharing on this slide a couple of different ways in which people have considered the record cycle and how records are created and managed over time, and then potentially archived and reused in various ways, or deleted, or in other ways expunged. Some people like to consider this, because of the reuse, more of a records management continuum than a cycle. But at universities, records management functions often sit in the university archives, because there's a lot of overlap between ensuring that records of enduring historical value make their way to the archives with enough contextual info for that data to be understood and usable in the future, and all the other steps one has to take to manage the records and reuse them. Archivists like me like records management because it means there's more people thinking about the data that surrounds them and what might be valuable to retain or important to toss. And as I maybe alluded to earlier, unlike librarians, perhaps archivists aren't afraid to throw things away. So our elevator pitch, for the last couple of years, we've been thinking in the libraries with some partners about how Stanford currently approaches records management. And I wanted to just share some of our thoughts and some opportunities for other folks at the university to weigh in and get involved. We're really interested in hearing some impressions, but I just want to reiterate that we're in very early stages of considering what additional support for records management might look like at the university. But I think that also puts us in a really exciting position where there's a lot we could do, a lot of directions we could go. So Stanford could use a records management program to strategically navigate challenges in memory, security, and security. Well, I guess security is a big challenge, but probably there's another word that was meant to be there. With the shift to digital, Stanford has a great need and opportunity to organize and implement a new approach that also accommodates our paper legacy. So what have we done so far in the libraries thinking about these opportunities? We've scanned what our peer institutions, other universities are doing, what some corporations are doing. We've interviewed some stakeholders across the university, and we've kicked off some preliminary discussions with some other partners who are we see would be really key collaborators in any effort like this. So looking at some peer institutions, we see that many of them do have a formal records management program. Stanford is one of the few of the ones we looked at that does not. So that sort of piqued our interest that maybe this is something, why are our peers so interested in these activities? And we also looked at, as I mentioned, a corporate comparison and specifically in the tech and biotech fields to see what they've been up to. And we found also that they have in some cases, very long-running records management programs in place. So when we started to have discussions with some potential collaborators or just started reaching out informally to people, we heard a few things that made us think maybe there's something here, something to ramping up our support however we can. So one person said all the email and attachments in our office are printed out. We're not sure how or even if we're permitted to manage our correspondence digitally. Someone said they're the only ones in their office who knows how to access 20 years of records and wistfully mentioned, hopefully they won't get hit by a bus. But we also hope that. We also heard things like our committees don't know what needs to be kept, and it's really important. An educational campaign would be really helpful. And we even heard people say, things along the lines of this is something that it's really important that should be looked at holistically and that we haven't really done that at Stanford in the past for whatever reason. So some of the strategic drivers that we're thinking about in terms of why we'd want to support records management now rather than in the past, or why the time might be especially right. Some of the systems migrations and enterprise storage changes, the transition to a more robust high-risk data strategy, and some of the records retention strategy that's also coming out of DOR and some other places on campus. So we've identified some opportunities, and I just want to mention again that these are very sort of preliminary. We're just thinking about what would have the most bang for its buck, what would really be helpful in supporting people, the university, navigate some of these records management challenges. So conducting a record survey. A record survey is where you actually, look around campus and all the physical and digital places where people manage their files and try to get a better handle on what we have at the university, what those files are. Developing and communicating a records management schedule. A records management schedule would actually specify for these types of records, here's what you should do with them. Hold on to them for 5 years until they're no longer active, as an example, and then discard them or send them to the university archives or follow some other plan. Perhaps investigating and recommending specific tools and services, educating and training people on records retention, including how to employ effective methods of lifecycle management through Stanford's existing tools and services, and potentially helping provide consulting and individual unit support. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, just quickly move through some of these slides and maybe call out one or two items. So as I mentioned, a record survey could be something very broad to inform a needs analysis. We'd identify some of the people, key stakeholders and contacts from each unit on campus, and from the perspective of the university archives, help identify records of enduring historical value as well. The records management schedule would help develop requirements and recommendations based on the needs of record types. And really importantly, work with staff and offices to build a network of people who, a community of people responsible for records management activities and local units. Investigating and recommending specific tools and services. So the idea is to identify and promote effective methods for lifecycle management and retention. And a reason why I think this is really the right group to be talking about on these issues, is we're considering the formation of a community of practice to discuss the preferred tools and methods. And that is something that I think at a grassroots level would be really helpful for Stanford and really helpful for the archives. And I think in general, a great segue towards seeing what the needs really are in this area. Helping people navigate all the challenges of records management on campus. And of course, as I mentioned, reaching out to offices on campus that manage active records. There are some campus units that we're always trying to support how we can. Of course, we want to be the archives for the whole university, but just thinking of this off the bat, there's some offices, including the Centers for Equity, Community, and Leadership and student organizations that we think could really use some basic and support, administrative help and support. Some fairly understaffed parts of the university, but also broader consulting and support of educational and training activities. And of course, system replacements on campus could trigger the need for additional consulting. So really, we just want to be helpful and help in identifying and preserving the Stanford's really important assets. Privacy was probably the last word. Memory, security, and privacy were really hope that we could be helpful in having the university find the balance across those. And we really want to ensure that these records of enduring historical value are preserved. And we think we have hopefully some tools in place to help. So that's why we want to be involved in this process. But at this point, I think we might have a few minutes for any types of questions anybody might have about this process or ideas about how we could all talk more about this in the future.
Josh, that was great. If anyone does have a question, if you'd like to raise your Zoom hand, I think we'll be able to see that if we go back to the gallery view. And while you're doing that, there were two questions that showed up in chat. I'll lead with a question from Jessica Sharkness, who has asked, have you considered how we might preserve Tableau dashboards like the ideal dashboard?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I have two thoughts on that, but I think I would probably look towards some of my peers in the libraries in Tom's group and in our digital preservation lab. We're really fortunate to have some specialists. One is preserving some of the data itself in the cases where, if there is a data stream, a raw data stream that could be exported as a CSV file, that's always, of course, a preference for us so that we could support whatever interfaces people might have in the future with additional data to make sense of what we're doing. But of course, with any sort of interactive, if any sort of software that provides different views into the data, really those views are itself part of the context and what we'd be trying to preserve. So there's a few different approaches that I've seen people take for that. One is capturing the Tableau data in whatever formats are supported, and then emulating a Tableau viewer so that even if the software changes in the future, we would have the software available in the libraries or elsewhere, or maybe made available online for people to use. So these are all areas we're kind of exploring. And then when it comes to preserving data that is also access is provided in a web format, there's various kinds of web archiving technologies, including technology that captures data as if someone browsing the web would capture it, rather than crawling websites, which is a more traditional way of crawling the web. So we do have a few different tools in our toolbox that are all becoming more mature. But yeah, that is a challenge that's come up before, and it's something we're considering. And I think it's really helpful to hear also from you about how much of that content there is and what's most important from your perspective to preserve. And then if you're part of a community of people who are working with Tableau, and you might have more expertise and experience in that area about what's going on with migrations across the software, and especially if there comes a time when you're not able to read past iterations, right? Well, of course, we want to stay ahead of that and be as supportive as we can.
Thanks, Josh. We have about 1 minute left. I will read one question which was asked very early on, how do you become an archivist? What does your career journey look like? And I'll also give you a question that Doug Berman just posed, is could you suggest any guidelines for what an administrative analyst should consider sending to the archive? You get to pick one.
Well, I'm always thrilled to talk about the journey as a career journey as a university archivist. Let's see if I could do them both in 30 seconds. I worked in libraries from when I was in college, and I found some really great people who were interested in helping provide people with access to information. And I just sort of took to that, starting in music libraries. And when I got to library school, archives it was so obvious to me that was really the most interesting path, where you got to work with the stuff and help people tell their stories. And I found that really exciting. So if anybody's potentially interested in exploring this field, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Any guidelines for what an analyst should consider sending to the archive? Absolutely, we provide some guidelines. I think I shared maybe a few on a previous slide, but we provide some guidelines through our website. So I'll just mention that if you Google Stanford Archives, you'll come across our website that provides similar kinds of guidelines. But really, any data that is used to make decisions that you could think that maybe at some point could answer a question by a current administrator, a faculty member, a researcher, and that's a pretty big subset potentially. But of course, we want it to be practical as well. So we want to set maybe identify some key records in different units, and then make sure that we're all talking with each other. So thank you so much for the question. And please, if anybody, Doug or anyone else, has any questions about specifics, or if anybody's interested in that community of practice and records management and what that could look like, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you so much.
All right, Josh, thank you very much. I do think you've succeeded in providing a different kind of presentation, and definitely tickles a different part of the brain. So next up, we have our final keynote for this morning, and Jessica Muehlberg, the Associate Registrar for Curriculum Management and Scheduling in the University Registrar's Office, will be speaking. Jessie Muehlberg, excuse me, I need more coffee. PhD is currently serving as the Associate Registrar for Curriculum Management and Scheduling. She is the project lead for the Curriculum Management and Class Scheduling Implementation projects. Within the realm of student affairs, she has served in positions in all phases of the data collection and analysis process, from data analyst, business analyst, and product owner. In her spare time, she enjoys teaching courses in systems thinking and trying to convince her fingers to form bar chords on the guitar. So Jessie, you have the floor.
Thank you. One moment while I share my slides. So for my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the opposite end of the data process. So we've seen some really amazing dashboards and presentations about how to present the data. And I really want to talk about another passion side of mine, is how do we make it as easy as possible to get the data into our systems as cleanly as possible. Through my professional career, I actually started as a data analyst and got involved in implementations of major ERP systems early on, and found that the better we made and designed our data entry side of our processing, the better our reporting became. And so this has just become an interest of mine. So I wanted to share a specific project that's about halfway through right now at Stanford, where we're at, what we've learned, and where we're going, and how we're thinking about this, and how it will eventually impact a chunk of reporting at Stanford. So it's a long title. I know, I was trying to be cute. What we're doing. So the Connected Curriculum Project is part of a larger series of projects being led by our Vice Provost for Student Academic Services, Johanna Metzgar. It's tied to the RER roadmap for student academic services. And everything you see in red is connected to what we consider connected curriculum. And this started actually back in 2019 with two big projects that were started. And The one I was more involved in is a curriculum management discovery project. And this is one where we teamed up with consultants to actually spend some time talking with a lot of the departments and staff on campus who interact with our instructors, who have the responsibility for getting the details of our curriculum into our systems. And I'm going to share some of what we learned about that. And then also where we're at with changing that experience for the better. Other pieces involved in connected curriculum involve implementing a new degree audit, which is a process that's going on. We have implemented a new curriculum management system. We have started a new curriculum scheduling. Have replaced the bulletin, are continuing to work on enhancing that. We will be replacing Explore courses and eventually looking at our scheduling systems. And this is in context of a bunch of other projects going on within student and academic services, eventually leading up to the replacement of our student information services into the future when its life cycle ends. So just for the context. So that discovery process in 2019, back in the days where we actually talked to people in person, included 27 interviews. We had 40 hours of audio, 160 pages of notes. We talked to individuals in 7 different schools, 10 departments, 2 IDPs, and a lot of our affiliated programs that are involved in curriculum. Curriculum meaning programs, courses, classes, etc. And this was done with a partner, one consultant that we brought on to help us out. So what did we find out? That this process is very disjointed. It involves working to get our staff in the departments are talking to all of their instructors and faculty, trying to collect this information. It happens at a time of other big processes on campus because we are just finishing up with graduate admissions in April. We have degree checkout, which is the process by which departments are validating that their students are eligible for graduation in June. Commencement planning. This year's particularly difficult because we have 2 1/4 commencements going on to catch up those students that didn't get a commencement in 2020. And with all of this happening at once and no central system, there's incomplete data, there's non-compliance with a lot of those deadlines, too many systems that aren't talking, and they have to do a lot of extra data entry. So what we found is a lot of the departments had come up with their own ways of making sense of this process. So some had Google Forms, Qualtrics forms. We found FileMaker Pro databases. Some used emails, and we even had one that said, no, I just get Post-it notes on my desk in the morning of changes to courses I needed to make from the instructors. What they ended up having to do with all of that incoming data for their courses, their classes, the changes in their degree programs, is they had to put it into our bulletin, which was one software system. Then they had to go put it into Access, which was another system for courses. And then they had to put it in CPS Class, which was another system for classes. And there was some communication between these, but each of these systems stored different types of data. And then on top of that, they often had their websites. The faculty had to put information in the bookstore if they wanted to request books. I didn't put the library e-reserves up here. VCA is the VQE scheduling system. That is another one to handle some of their special processes. They had program worksheets at some schools, and they had student handbooks. None of these systems talked in a very limited way. And so these departments have had to create their own ways to collect the data. Then they had to manually enter it, and in some cases manually enter it multiple times. So that's a mess, right? And that's what we found in 2019. We're like, we need to change this. And so, some of the other things we heard is, the multiple data entry. In this case, this user set across 4 systems is what they had to handle. One of their biggest challenges was managing many places, that the same program and course data then also shows up for the student as well. We had another users saying we need rules and policies communicated, agreed upon best practices around curriculum planning. This was a challenge we saw in those systems is, do they all have the same validations for their data? And meaning we got slightly mismatched information. And then, of course, around the same time, the Future of the Major, which was a big faculty senate initiative, also identified that current Stanford systems for curriculum management were not well positioned to identify elements that satisfy a major, which was one of their big issues, is they're trying to design what should the future of Stanford majors look like. They're finding that there is no great place to go to data to look at what's going on today. And so, you know, that was a big barrier that was identified. And so at the end of this discovery, one of the big things that we recommended, and is something I'm a strong advocate for, is there is, particularly with technology, is you can't necessarily buy a tool and solve your problem. You can't just change your policy and solve your problem. You can't just change your practice and solve your problem. It's usually a combination of all three. And I find, depending on where you're from in the structure of the university, you tend to rely on one of these three. It's like, you're a faculty member, you're like, let's change the policy, that's how we'll fix something. If you're an administrator, you're like, let's change how we do this to fix this problem. If you're tied to IT, you're like, let's find a new system and that'll solve our problem. And the solution is generally somewhere in the middle. Is yes, you can get a new software system, but typically you're going to have to address some of your policy limitations or some of your practices as well. The system isn't going to fix everything. And so that was one of our big, and is continuing to be one of our big mantras and guiding principles to looking at connected curriculum as a whole, is we were able to get new tools, but they're not going to solve the data problems, the communication problems. They're a key piece to this, but we have some policy problems, we have some practice problems, and we're working on those at the same time. So, you know, the pitch was, and still is this connected curriculum ecosystem should be more connected, right? The experiences not only of the student, who is also incredibly important in this, but of the staff who are getting the data into these systems should have as few touch points as possible, so the data gets in, it flows to where it should be. So that brings us back to, where are we now at this roadmap? So we did that discovery, we identified those points. We're now kind of right in the middle of this. We've accomplished quite a few things. We just started class scheduling, which is one of the big, you know, when I showed that initial tripod of key systems, bulletin, courses, and schedule, that those are the three key systems when we talk about curriculum. That's the last of the three. And so when we get this last piece implemented, we have some of that core in there and can start working. So I want to show you some of the things that we've done, and then talk about some of the design principles that we're holding true to. So the first is the program forms, and this was our first big go live, and this was in August of 2021. Program forms are new to Stanford. We don't really have something comparable to this. The most comparable thing is these data used to be a web page, and so none of this was extractable. To report on the data that was in existence prior to this, you had to go to each web page and copy and paste it. Now these data are in a relational database. They're relational probably is not the most accurate. They are in a database, they're in fields. You can go pull this information. We do have the provost office now pulling some of this information for our WASC accreditation in March, which is amazing. Some of that information is now, for example, the program learning outcomes are now in a standalone field, so they can just be pulled. I wanted to show more of this, and I'm going to cross my fingers because this is going to be a live demo real quick, because there's no way screenshots would have been able to cover. But one of the features of this system is mapping for, in this case, this is STS, just one of our many programs, is actually mapping degree requirements, in this case, core requirements. So courses, complete at least 4 of these courses to this program. And so all of our undergraduate programs were mapped this way last year, and our graduate programs are being mapped this way this year. And so, for example, requirements like writing in the major, the capstone is a big initiative this year, is to make sure every undergraduate has a capstone requirement. Because they're now in a database, they're theoretically extractable, and there are APIs for this. And that's one of the areas that we're going to be moving into next, is working with IRNDS and others to say, okay, if we now have these data, what do we want to do with them, right? So those are the next questions that we're getting into. And this is what the future of the major had indicated. We don't have, this data was not in existence in a way that could be reported and accessed. What's also nice is for students, these data are also presented to them as degree requirements as well, in a much friendlier format, so that they can see what their requirements are. They can explore and look at that, so that they can see their learning outcomes if they're interested. They can see external credit policies, etc. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Yay, that worked. Live demos are always scary. What's nice is also with this system, and one of the reasons we went with it, is I can, as a funky tech, a functional, high-level functional administrator, I can add fields over time very easily. It does not require a developer to do that, which is incredibly flexible. So if our accreditor says you need to track this field at the program level, we can add it. We can say, do students see this, or is this just internal, etc. So that's program forms that went live. We're continuing to add to that. There's additional functionality that'll come out over the next couple of years. Course forms went live last month. They replace this. This is our old Access course web form. It now looks like this. This is the new course form. It's now in the same system. So we have gone from those 3 systems now down to 2. One of the other features is each of these fields has the ability to add validations on them, configurable by us. So now we can make sure that we're enforcing our policies, that the data are clean, that all of the fields are entered. One of the other features also about this system is something called dependencies. So I'm actually looking at Math 20, which is a course, because last year we built out the relationships between courses and programs. A department user can come into Math 20 and identify that their course is being used as a completion requirement for these other degree programs, that their course is a prerequisite for enrollment for these other courses. Now, normally they would have known, oh yes, of course, my Math 20 course is a prereq for Math 21, but they may not have known that Math 20 is being used as an enrollment prerequisite for Econ 102A. They probably would not have known that Math 20 would satisfy a degree requirement for all of these programs. So as a department, they're now able to start understanding how much of an impact their course has for other programs, or in reverse, how many other programs are using them for it's how big of an impact are they as a service course. And so right now in the system, they have to look it up course by course, but once again, this is data available in an API. So how now can we either work with our vendor, because we've mentioned this for a vendor, this is great data that we need dashboards on, or do we work with IRNDS? These are all data that we wanted to be able to report on for a while, like which of our courses are service courses that are serving many departments, and how are they supported, et cetera. Now data that's available. Class scheduling is coming. This is a screen. We just put the data in the system. The data has not been cleaned. If you look closely, you will know that there's something wrong with this data. But these are out of the box reporting for the class scheduling system that is also in the same system. But the class scheduling system for this particular vendor was what they started with, so it has the most robust reporting. It is slated and planned to go live from February 2023. has delivered instructor dashboard. So instructors will be able to go in, instructors will be able to set their own room preferences. We'll be able to look at things like the distribution across the day of a department's schedule, their seat utilization by hour, how the satisfaction of preferences by, you know, how well did we get the faculty preferences on what type of room they need, a whole slew of other information. And it pulls in enrollment data as well and does enrollment projections. So department users involved in scheduling will be able to see, you know, how many seats am I projected to need this year based on past year data as they're building the schedule. So that's something that is coming this year. And once we get this going, now all of those disparate systems for our end users will all be in one, which is amazing. We're working towards that. So what's still on the list for this project? Definitely replacing Explore courses is on that list. A lot of our policies and practice conversations slowed down because of COVID, and we need to get those going again. We've had several, these are happening primarily at the associate dean level, but a lot of them need to move into the faculty sphere as well. So those still need to happen. Faculty are going to be getting access to the system in another year. So we're starting to think and prepare for that. And then the big one for me is now we're starting to get this data into the system, is how do we get the data into the EDW for access more broadly for reporting? What about these APIs so that we can get data to department websites automatically so data doesn't have to be replicated on those websites? Can we make these data available to library e-reserves? Can we make these data available to the bookstore for purchase? Because there's a way for us to collect, you know, if you need a book, information, that's something that we could collect in our system and send over. So how can we think about some of these things, and where are the other opportunities? And that gets a lot to some of our design principles, and Dilbert is always a good source of content when it comes to business processing. But when I talk about data in design, I really talk about, and I think about four things. And the first one is nearness to source. So when we're thinking about how we're designing our system, is how close to the source of the data can we get for the data entry? So if the source of that data is the faculty member or instructor, how can we design a system where it's the faculty member or instructor doing the first data entry? And when I first mentioned this, I get, oh, they're never going to do that. They're never going to do that. But think back to our initial discovery where all of the departments had Google Forms, Qualtrics forms, FileMaker Pro designs, emails, sometimes Post-it notes. That was a one-off case. It's rare, but they're doing it somewhere today, right? They're typing it up somewhere today. So because they're the ones that know what they want their title to be, what they want their description to be. And we have department staff that are entering in hundreds of these records, and a faculty member teaches anywhere between 3 to 6, maybe 8 courses per year. So if they enter in their 3 versus an SSO, their hundreds, they can enter, you know, the closer you get to the person that knows the data the best, the more accurate your data are going to be. So how do you manage that? Your validations, how well do you know your policies and practices so that you can stop bad data before the user clicks submit on the first time the data is entered? And that's something that we're always thinking about, always talking about. Quantity versus timing. So a lot of our forms in our prior systems wouldn't let you hit submit until every single field was entered, which means that our department users couldn't submit anything until they collected every little piece of data, even if it really wasn't required to start the business process. And so one of the things that we often think about is, how do we spread out our deadlines? What is the minimum amount of data we need for our systems to be happy to get the business process started? And we've been able to split some of our deadlines to say, well, actually, in order for this to work, we only need this subset right now. But the rest of this, we don't need until later. And that helps them out so that they're not having to build these secondary databases to collect this massive amount outside of the system before they can even begin to do data entry into our systems. So really thinking about that balance between those two. And then lastly, really, really trying as best we possibly can to, once it's entered, move the data. We can move the data. We have the APIs, we have the technology now. Let it flow to the systems that need to. And so when we take a step back, if those are our design principles, you know, that really makes us kind of rethink. So if we are putting in all of our courses and our class data, what are the other data about courses and classes that are being collected that have to go be entered into multiple systems? Is there a place to put them in here so there's one spot to enter that we can push out? Does that make sense? And it may not always, but those are the questions that we're starting to ask so that our users have a better experience. They're using fewer systems. They're having to go enter data fewer times, or at least enter the same data fewer times. How can we pre-populate some of the other systems that need courses, right? So those are the questions when we're thinking about the data inside. Those are the types of things that we tend to think about. And I think back to like the engineering presentation yesterday about, oh, we're finding data holes here and there. I'm trying to think about, at least on the course side, how can we prevent those from even trickling that far down into the process? So the question I kind of want to pose back to everybody is, you know, do I have all of the principles? Are there other things out there that we should be thinking about? And are these also principles that we should encourage others to think about at Stanford, right? So how do we kind of change this culture? Because I'll tell you, based off the conversations we have with these department staff, you know, they are responsible basically for getting all of the data that anyone that does reporting wants to report off of. They have the lion's share of getting it into the systems. So I would argue the more we think about how do we make it easier on them, I think it would be really well received. So, and our reporting and our decision making and our metrics and our analytics would be so much better. So that would be kind of my pitch, I would guess. So that's where we're at with the project. That's my little nugget of fun on data that I would share and open up for discussion. I mean, these are the two questions I would throw out to the group to say, what do you think? What could we add to this?
Yeah, hi Jesse, this is Jackson. This is a great talk. I especially like your the data in design principle. I can relate to it, and I agree this is a great principle to establish. I have a question about the first step that in your design, that you want to get to the nearest source as much as possible. And then here you have a lot of faculty entering data. I want to ask if you have run into the challenges to having faculty enter data directly.
So that we haven't yet, because we are unveiling. So our first big faculty forum is slated for not this August, but next August. And the first big faculty forum that we're working on is replacing the Waze forum in the old BCA system into ours.
Yeah.
And with our system, we're able to add all those validations to the fields and the help text. And the user interface on the form, we're hoping to design it. And we're going to be working with not only the SSOs, the Waze team, but also pulling in faculty to make sure that we ask the questions. And it's about that user design too. It's about making sure you're pulling them into the process. Are we using the language that you use? Because it's one of the things I found is the way we talk about curriculum isn't necessarily the same way faculty and instructors talk about it. So how do you translate that?
Yeah, I probably would also add that in terms of design, the language, the alignment of the terms certainly make a lot of sense. What you mentioned earlier, user interface, makes equally important sense. A lot of what we do currently is really web-based, and you know how busy faculties are, then how little time they could have on the screen. Well, I'm not too sure about the other department, but in Department of Medicine, that's the case. They take care of patients, they keep on the move all the time. Something that we've been struggling and we've been also thinking about is maybe extend the user interface beyond the web, just go into mobile, so that they give them a lot more flexibility. So that's something we've been thinking and then also doing in some cases.
Yeah.
So but thank you, Jesse.
Great thoughts.
Any other suggestions or reactions? Jesse, you probably have not been following chat because you've been doing such a good job talking, but lots of plaudits both for the new set of student systems and also around the philosophy undergirding it. I do wonder, this might make a great table topic exercise for your, I love your question at the end is where else should we think about applying this? And maybe we could continue the discussion that Jack just started if there's enough interest in the 1 o'clock hour. Is there?
Yeah, I have great interest. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah, thank you. What a great set of speakers. Jesse, you have taken us very strongly to close out the keynotes and into our first break. And Sarah, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all to our wonderful keynote speakers. As you can see, we have now a time for a 15-minute break. When we come back, we'll be moving into our breakout sessions, and you'll have the opportunity to choose which breakout room you would like to join. America will be guiding us through how they'll work when we return. So we'll see you here at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Thanks, folks.